Hi, I'm Dan. I'm an alcoholic. I've been through this process with the help of a Big Book Step Study sponsor, who had been through the process with the sponsor, who has been with the sponsor, and a loving God. I've made my amends, and I practice the ladder steps on a daily basis, and when I don't, the world gets colorful and treats me accordingly. Can everybody hear me? Or? Okay. Better? Okay. I suffer from hearing loss, so I have hearing aids, so I can hear me, but no one else can. So I tend to mumble. I don't normally go into much of a drunkalogue about my past, but I didn't want to be like my father, who was an alcoholic, and he died an alcoholic death, didn't find a solution. So I didn't drink until I was out of the Army, and when I did, I drank just like my father, like every alcoholic, and I turned out to be a real alcoholic, finding myself in places that I didn't want to be, with people I didn't want to be with, doing things I shouldn't have been doing. And that went on for decades. And then I found my bottom in December of 2009. And as I was being escorted from my home by the police and handcuffed to a gurney to be taken to the hospital, a police officer said, "Hey, you don't have to be like this if you don't want to." And he put a meeting book of AA on my chest. And I couldn't get it off because I was handcuffed. So when I got to the hospital, the doctor and the people who were taking care of me took that and put it in my coat, took my coat and put it over there, so it followed me everywhere. And I still see that police officer. At the time, that police officer was probably in his mid-20s, and now he's got children that have been through the organizations that I'm a volunteer for. He has no idea the impact that he has had on my life. But I support everything he does secretly, So that was my beginning into AA. I tried to get into rehab. They wouldn't take me because I was a real alcoholic, and at the time they didn't think I would be successful. So, and they told me that straight out, so I had to put my phone on speaker to let my wife know, because I was facing divorce and the loss of my family, and so the beginning of my sobriety was horrific. I also smoked like a fiend, and it was just terrible. So that's enough about the past, because a funny thing happened. The only thing that I did was I went to an AA meeting. When I say I went to an AA meeting, my wife brought me to an AA meeting, walked me to the door, pushed me in, and said, "His name's Dan," and then left. So we get here however we get here. And I didn't talk for about 4 months. They knew my name because my wife ratted me out. And after about 4 months, this big, scary human being that was sitting on the side of me elbowed me and said, "Say your name." And I said my name. And then all of the people that heard my name, came up, and a fellowship created around me, whether or not I knew it at the time. And that big, scary human being turned out to be in the same amount of sobriety as I was, and he was terrifying. I only sat near him because no one else sat near him, and no one bothered him, so no one would bother me. After about 6 months of misery, people started sitting near him, and he was no longer safe to be around, because I didn't want people to talk to me. And then he would bring people to meetings, and people liked him, and he was horrifying at first. So I followed him to meetings, because like if this was as good as it was going to get, I was going to go drink. And I made a pact with myself that if I ever drink again, I'm going to drink until I die. I don't want to half-ass it. Because it's really not an option. I'll lose way too much, and I worked really hard for this. So I followed him. He didn't know I was following him because I was terrified of him, because he was becoming a good human being. And physically he was enormous. But that said, I went to the meetings that he was going to, and I found myself in a Big Book Step Study meeting. I heard people talking the way that we talk in these rooms, and it scared the hell out of me. First meeting I went to where my sponsor was there, he was sharing from the front of the room about step 4-3, and I had never heard anyone talk like that. I didn't want to hear anything like that. I did not know that men could have feelings and share in front of other people, and didn't want anything to do with that. So I did what every scared human being should do. I left before the prayer, and he did too. He followed me to my car and said, hey, I think you need a sponsor, and I think I need to be it. I said, no. And he's like, well, what could go wrong? You could still be miserable in a year. And I'm like, okay. So, now mind you, this is not a human being I'd ever come into contact with. He had tattoos everywhere. He was big, giant, just a scary human being to me. I went home. Now, since this happened, my wife got into AA as well. And I said, I met someone that's going to be my sponsor. She's like, who? And I told her his name. He goes, I heard him speak 2 months ago. I've been praying that you meet him somewhere. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. And so that's the man who took me through these steps and showed me how to do this stuff, right? And so he gave me the book. He did what we're supposed to do, right? Now, in the middle of this, right, there's like two years of me bouncing around in AA trying to follow this guy that was getting better faster than me, and my ego was hit by that because, I want life not to suck. And it still sucked, a couple of men who, I met with there's one guy who met with me every Saturday morning at 7:30 in the morning. We would read on the back of his porch. He would make toast. I never knew peanut butter went on toast until I met him, and I'm like, oh my God, this is great. Just these little things. So I'm gonna go off on little tangents because that's what I do. But and I'm terrified. I suffer from anxiety, and this is the worst thing in the world for me to do. But practice every day. Sorry. See, I can hear me. You can't hear me. I can hear me. I can hear me just fine. It sounds like I'm screaming. So because of this process, right, I learned how to do things and follow directions. And so I go to a therapist. My therapist said, you might want to take a look at your PTSD. I took a look at that. I suffer from that as well. I do a lot of work on that. I met with another counselor and took a couple of neuro tests to just learn more about me, and turns out I'm cognitively inflexible is the term. And so it fits a lot of things, right? But it explains a lot about me. But one of the things my sponsor said when I told him my diagnosis, he said that helps knowing what it is, right? I'm like, ooh, I never thought of that. He's like, once you figured out that you were an alcoholic and you resigned yourself to that, now you have these directions, right, to help with that. He's like, now you know what that is. So as a cognitively inflexible human being, I don't like doing things I don't like to do, so I stop doing them. And I just make my world smaller and smaller and smaller. So as a result, everything I do is great because it's only me doing it. But and I'm comfortable doing that stuff, so I have to get out of my comfort level. And that was one of the things was when my sponsor said, you know, he's fine. It's joyful to hear the child. Backstory on me, I have 4 kids that's seen me drunk, and I have 1 that has never seen me drunk because someone granted me grace. So, and you have that shirt on that says product of grace. Last night, someone granted me grace when I was a bad human being. So, this process has helped me in so many ways. And one of the ways is my sponsor asked me if I would do this and help other men go through this process. I lied and said yes at the time because I think that's what I was supposed to say, right? You know, like I was afraid that he would break up with me if I said no. And I finally found a good one, you know, and I was like, damn it. So I'm like, yeah, you know, but I had nothing to offer anybody. So it was a pretty safe bet to say yes. But then he taught me how to follow directions. He taught me how to be honest with myself on page 94, right? That there's he outlined the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal, how you straightened out your past, and why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. He did all that, right? He told me about 4 and 5, he told me about 8 and 9, and then he told me about 12 to keep it all together. And as I went through this process, and I ended up at other big book meetings, and I got through this process, I found myself in interesting men's meetings, and I would go all over the place, following people or, you know, in fellowship. Got to a big book step study meeting in Somerville, a men's meeting. In the front of the room was Peanut Butter Toast Guy, sharing, you know, and I'm like, And as I get through this process and get through this, I'm like, oh my God, he did everything right out of the book. He followed all of the directions. He met me where I was, and when I stopped, he didn't chase me. He wished me luck. He didn't ruin the opportunity for this next guy who followed me out of a meeting and said, hey, I should be your sponsor, right? And so like, whenever I'm on this step, I think of Peanut Butter Toast Guy, because like he changed my life. I have peanut butter on my toast all the time now, but I also know like when to not push too much, right? I've had a lot of sponsees. I've had a lot of them get to step 3. I've had a lot of them start writing. I've had 6 of them go through the entire process. Probably had 60 sponsees, right? In that time, the one thing that has happened is I've remained sober the entire time. You know, so like searching out those opportunities and being able to stay true to, you know, Peanut Butter Toast Guy, honestly, makes me capable of being a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I'm not perfect. However, I hold myself to a different standard. The way this works in my life, right, on a regular basis is this weekend, right? Excuse me, they better not play any of that music. Yeah, they're gonna. Okay, so we're gonna try and get through this before that song's over. But this weekend I had my daughter goes to a school where she's one of 5 kids in a class. She has never seen me drink. And like I said, me and my wife are both in AA. She's never seen either of us drink. I have 4 additional children. They're all older. and they've seen the destruction. So I can see the psychological impact that my drinking has done to them. The class had a get-together last night. Planned it 2 weeks ago. Everybody drinks. Me and my wife don't. People who drink tend to get a little rowdy and, judgmental, or, like I've been around them once before, and it was pretty difficult because I have a process and I hold myself to a higher standard, right? Or I'm just insane and I'm judgmental, right? So I did, before we went in, I prayed, I asked God to show me what I needed to see. Halfway through, some guy comes up to me and says, "You're not drinking, why not?" I'm like, "Man, I suck at it. I did it." I'm like, I said, he's like, "Oh, you don't like it?" I'm like, "No, I like it. You don't like me when I do it." He's like, "Oh." I'm like, "So I don't do it anymore." He's like, "How'd you do that?" I'm like, "Really? Do you want to know?" He's like, "I do." And his eyes are big. And I'm like, I'm like, "I go to AA." He's like, "Really? That worked?" I'm like, "Yeah." And so I texted him my phone number. And he texted me later on that night and said thanks, but he hasn't texted me yet, Because a peanut butter toast guy, I only told him how bad I was at drinking. I didn't go heavily into it because he was drinking, But he was shocked that someone can be in a place like that, and Now, mind you, I'm really nice to this guy, and I'm really nice to everybody else because, I'm wicked uncomfortable, and I'm cognitively inflexible, and I know that now. But I know that now. So knowing that, I'm like, all right, let's do what's uncomfortable. And so I do that, and this morning I have to come here, and this is perfect, really, because after this, I'm going to a cookout with my family. And I heard someone say it, and I'm going to steal it, but I'm going to a cookout with the people who installed all the buttons that I have, so they know how to push them. And none of them have this process. Should some of them? Maybe. But, I'm the only one that drank like me. I've been to cookouts with them in the past, and nobody's getting as drunk as I was, and no one's as embarrassing, and no one's ever gone streaking. It's just me. And so now I have to go into that environment and practice these principles, right? And carry my water and hope that if someone needs anything, I can have God show me that and do what Peanut Butter Toast guy did, just enough. And if he wants to text me back or if something, but be comfortable in the place that I am, because the reality is there's an opportunity out there everywhere for all of us to help some human being, and they don't have to be alcoholics. That's the thing that my sponsor tells me all the time. You don't have to, you can carry this message to another alcoholic, but the gift is when you carry this message to one of the quote-unquote normal people out there who look at you, I call it the shelter dog look. When you come across a human, you say something and they're like, they look at you like, what the hell? Because they're confused at what you're talking about and how you're presenting yourself, because people don't present themselves the way that we do in here a lot of times when we're on the beam. And that's not a judgmental thing. That's just, I often get the shelter puppy look when I'm not acting the way God wants me to act. Because I'm an alcoholic. I can be very rude with my words. I don't need alcohol for that. I can be cursed, I can cut you with my tongue, and then most of the time, humans don't say, "Hey, stop that." They look at you and they go, and that's, when I see that, that's God talking to me saying, "Stop. You know, we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. You're just mean. You know, and like, I get that often. But one of the things I never did, right, is I never did that to Peanut Butter Toast Guy. You know, like, he never did anything that made me mad, or, you know, what happened was I got uncomfortable writing, just like a lot of people that have written with me. But after I've been through it, and now I know, you know, and God presented him to me exactly where I needed to see him at that meeting. Through the process, looking at him, going, oh, I get it now, you know. And so, if you're new to this, welcome, and congratulations, you're in the right place. If you're starting writing, keep going, and if you've done all of this and you're helping other human beings, congratulations, keep doing that, because the world needs us to do that. And thanks everyone for being here. I appreciate it.